When I was 5 months pregnant, I answered my husband's phone on impulse. A syrupy little girl voice came through. Daddy, when are you coming to see us? Mommy and I both miss you. Julian was in the kitchen rinsing fruit when the call came. I was curled on the sofa with a throw pillow, half watching a reality show, and I picked up casually when the screen lit. Before I could speak, the child's bright, unfamiliar voice piped, Daddy, when are you coming to see us? Mommy and I both miss you. Getting no answer, she chirped again, Daddy? Daddy, are you there? I stayed silent, then a woman's voice asked, Joy, who are you talking to? The little girl sounded flustered. No one, Mommy. The line clicked dead. I glanced at the screen, the contact read Ms. Dunn. My stomach dropped. I deleted the log without a flicker of expression. My fingers clamped around the phone. Without that name I'd have sworn it was a Ms. Dial, but a woman's instinct told me this Ms. Dunn was anything but simple with Julian. And every time he worked late, it was always Ms. Dunn calling. I looked toward the man in the apron at the kitchen island and found it hard to breathe. I set the phone back exactly where it had been and forced my emotions into line. Julian carried over a bowl of washed, diced fruit and sat beside me, stroking my 5-month bump with gentle care. Avery, what should we name the baby? I stared at him without blinking. Gentle, refined, considerate, the compliments I heard most. One phone call now made me wonder if every bit of our love story had played only in my head. I kept a polite smile in place, same as always. Seems early when we don't even know boy or girl. He fed me a cube of mango, voice honeyed. Then we'll pick one of each. As long as it's ours, I'll love either. My feelings tangled. I told myself maybe it really was a wrong number, maybe it was Ms. Dunn's child after all. I was still assembling that excuse when the phone rang again. I caught the screen, Ms. Dunn. Julian answered with perfect calm. What do you need? I couldn't make out the reply, only the occasional squeal of an excited child. He glanced at me, bent to brush my mouth with his, tapped the phone, then took a cigarette onto the balcony. One hand held the phone, the other a lit cigarette. The smoke curled up each time he inhaled. Whatever he said, his eyes flicked back to me, opaque, all steadiness and restraint. He stayed outside until the cigarette burned down, then stared into the dusk a moment longer. Since my pregnancy he'd almost quit smoking. The knot in my gut pulled tighter. I wanted to say, don't go, I need you right now. If he stayed I could still pretend none of this was real, but after a hesitation he spoke. Avery, Ms. Dunn from the partner firm wants to discuss the project. I'll step out for a bit, and I'll bring home that red velvet cake you love. I couldn't read the emotion in his gaze. Panic scraped at my ribs. My fingers slowly uncurled from his sleeve. I surrendered. All right. Go. He ruffled my hair, picked up his car keys, and left. The instant the door shut the apartment felt cavernous. I went to the bedroom, copied the number I'd memorized, and paid someone to trace it. Money shortens every road. By late afternoon the address sat in my inbox. Next to an elementary school, one of those riverside catchment zones money can't always buy. Julian had invested serious effort. I studied the pin on my phone, then drove over alone. Maybe it was the pregnancy, maybe plain denial, but I crawled along the road. What has to come will come. I parked at the gate, still wondering which building, when I spotted the familiar figure holding a soft, round little girl. Beside him walked a slim woman. Their body language was almost platonic, yet my heart lurched. I watched the child tug his hand until he hoisted her up. She planted a loud kiss on his cheek. 3, maybe 4 years old, I thought, glancing at my own pronounced bump. Julian and I had been married 8 years. His daughter was already this big. The pain was total, as though something vital was being ripped out, every feeling funneled into pure grief. In the rearview mirror I looked wrecked, hair unkempt, skin dull from pregnancy, 10 years older overnight. I stared until the laughter drifting across the street told me how happy he was. At last, numb, I dialed him. It rang a while. I saw Vera lift Joy from his arms and carry her toward the snack stalls for candied haw skewers while Julian stepped aside to answer. My throat felt barbed. When are you coming home? His smooth, cultured voice came back. Honey, probably not till tonight. The cake's ordered, it'll be delivered before I'm back. Eat cake and wait for me, okay? Same tone as always, faultless. If he weren't cheating he wouldn't need the lie. That single sentence killed the last of my hope. Sunset painted the city. Outside, crowds bustled and shouted and lived. I hadn't turned the AC on. Cold soaked through me. The baby sensed my turmoil and kicked. I steadied my breathing, palm on my belly, soothing the tiny life inside. I dug my nails into my arm to stifle any sob. Then I'll wait. I hung up, discovered my face was already wet, and wiped it roughly. Years ago, when Julian and I had nothing, every crisis ended with him saying, "Stay calm and think." So I dried my eyes, lifted my phone, and took photographs for proof. No screaming confrontation, no demands, just cold, frightening calm. What was done, more words were useless. When Julian came home, I was curled on the sofa spooning cake into my mouth. He sat beside me, bringing the chill of night. I shrank back. He laughed at my skittishness and wiped a fleck of cream from my lip. Acting like a little kid, I tugged a smile. "Isn't that what you like?" It was true. Julian granted every whim, let me pout, coaxed me back to smiles, so I'd never imagined he could keep another family. Without missing a beat he said, "Of course I spoil my wife." I dropped my gaze, hiding the storm, and asked, "If one day you stop loving me, will you split what you feel for me and give it to someone else?" A flicker of panic crossed his eyes, gone in an instant. "Avery, after everything we've shared? I'd never divide this love." I met his stare. The sincerity looked unfeigned, as if the entire day had been a hallucination and he remained the perfect husband who still adored me. I let a dark smile bloom. "And if you break that promise?" He studied me for a long moment. In the end, I was the one who broke the silence. I lifted a forkful of red velvet cake to his lips to lighten the mood. "All right, I was joking." I saw the breath he'd been holding slip out, then watched his lashes drop in quiet disappointment. I still remember the year Julian loved me most. In front of everyone he vowed that I was the love of his life, and that if he ever wronged me he would spend the rest of his days alone. Now hearts had simply changed, and that promise no longer counted. The instant Julian chose someone else, we were doomed. These past few days I've schemed every angle to gather proof of his affair. So when he told me he had to leave on a business trip, I knew my opening had arrived. He couldn't relax about leaving me and the baby, so besides Mrs. Hayes he hired 2 nannies to trade shifts looking after me. Tilting his head slightly, eyes lowered, he went over my food preferences again and again, deadly serious. I stared, dazed. Julian was 32 now. Time had planed the boyhood softness from his features, leaving them resolute, steady, magnetic with the gravity of a grown man. When he felt my gaze he curved his mouth. "Why are you standing way over there?" His glance landed on my bare feet, his expression changed, and he stood up in a rush, sweeping me into his arms, solid arms, and I pressed against his chest, hearing the thud of his heart. He bent to set me on the sofa, looked at me for a long moment, and scolded, mostly tenderly, "You have to take care of yourself now that you're pregnant. A cold is miserable when you're carrying a baby." Mrs. Hayes and the 2 new women laughed nearby. "The 2 of you are so in love." I curved my own lips, then slowly pushed him away. "Mind your image." I studied the man in front of me, feelings churning. I still don't know whether Julian does all this because he truly loves me, or because he can't discard the years we've shared, or simply because guilt makes him act. Real or fake or real, I have yet to see through it. Julian brushed my belly. "Avery, wait for me to come home." I smiled and agreed, but the moment his plane lifted off I turned the car toward the school gate to wait for his little girlfriend. The bell rang and students poured out. I picked her out at once. I stationed myself deliberately in their path and watched the woman lead the child past me, then lightning struck. The woman's face was 70% mine, only softer, the kind that makes men want to protect. What I couldn't stomach was recognizing her, Vera, Julian's former junior. My pulse lurched. Vera glanced over, and only when I bit my lip hard did she tug the child away. I'd come prepared, big hat, mask, so even if Vera had met me before, she didn't notice. Back in the driver's seat I sat motionless. Vera became Julian's junior in the 2nd year of our marriage. Julian had whispered to me back then that the new hire looked so much like me it hurled him back to when I was 22. We were the perfect couple then, leaning on each other, so solid I never doubted him. I had teased, "You're not going to fall for the woman who looks like me, are you, like in some soap?" Without a second's pause he silenced me with a kiss, then answered, breathless, "You stayed with me through every hell. No one can replace you." Finally he laid my hand on his chest. His heart galloped like hooves, fierce and hot. Love flooded his eyes and set my cheeks on fire. "Avery, I love you, only you. I won't split an ounce of that love for anyone else." He poured every word out bare. "Even if you 2 look alike, to me you're the one and only, irreplaceable." I gave his chest a shy little thump. "We're grown-ups and you're still saying cheesy stuff." But I beamed as I said it, so I never once questioned his devotion. I leaned against the seat and laughed, until the laughter broke and tears streamed. Am I the only one who remembers those vows? Julian and I grew up together. We've known each other since we were kids. When I was small, my parents divorced and each built a new family. Both decided I was excess baggage, neither wanted to keep me. Grandmother couldn't bear it and took me away. Mother had ignored Eleanor's warnings and married father, and after that grandmother's calls dwindled. I thought she disliked me too. Only when I was batted back and forth like a ball did the white-haired woman step forward, take my hand, and lead me out of that house. Because of the wreck I came from, Eleanor needed ages to coax me out of my shell. The timid, locked-in girl turned into someone who could smile and stand her ground. Then one summer a handsome mother and son arrived, and the whole village buzzed. Cicadas screamed overhead, the heat was brutal, and grandmother was sick. With the neighbor's permission, I waded into her lotus pond to pick pods for the porridge that might cool Eleanor's fever. Sunlight blazed like fire. I wove a leaf into a hat and, half submerged among towering lotus, hunted for ripe pods. That was when I met Julian. I was stretching for a pod when a gentle voice drifted over. Hey, kid, are the lotus seeds for sale? I turned. By the road stood a beautiful woman, makeup perfect, dress elegant, one hand holding a parasol, the other a suitcase. Beside her waited a boy, younger than a teenager but already breathtaking, pale as moonlight next to a sun-browned village kids. He stood quietly. I swiped a sleeve across my muddy face without caring, and I saw the boy's mouth lift. They're for sale, pay whatever you like. I chose the fattest pod and held it out, face streaked with earth. That day I earned $5 and ran to give them to the neighbor, but she told me to keep the money. Later I learned Julian's father had divorced his mother to marry a rich heiress, and the two of them had been exiled from the city to our village. With no status and no man to rely on, their life here was harsh. Eleanor was a brilliant cook and sometimes sent me over with dishes for them. She sighed, a woman raising a child alone, nothing harder. I remembered grandfather had died young and Eleanor had single-handedly brought mother up, who knew how many scornful looks she'd endured. That was why their plight moved her. Julian kept his distance but was always polite, and when the local bully picked on me he would drive the boy away, even if both of us ended up scraped and bruised. Bit by bit we became friends. At night we lay in grandmother's haystack and counted stars. When one of us was hurting we tiptoed to the other's window to whisper comfort. We walked to school together, did homework together, caught creek shrimp together, did every crazy thing side by side. When first love bloomed we simply slid into it, inevitable as sunrise. Cameron, the day the teacher told me Eleanor had died I went numb. I couldn't believe it. I begged leave, rushed home, found the rooms empty, and sobbed until I blacked out. Mother, whom I hadn't seen in years, flew back, had Eleanor cremated, and buried the ashes on the back hill beside grandfather, the kindest thing she ever did. But I never got to say goodbye. When I woke I was in the hospital. Julian, usually immaculate, looked worse than I did. Still in his school jacket, he'd fallen asleep slumped over my bed. When my fingers moved he jerked awake and hugged me hard. Avery, you're awake, you scared me to death. I could feel him trembling, could hear the terror in his voice. Tears broke loose and I sobbed against him. Julian, I don't have a home anymore. The grandmother who loved me most left me, and in the end I was still utterly alone. My tears soaked his shirt, but he didn't push me away in disgust. Instead he stroked my hair and comforted me. It's okay, Avery, grandmother and I are always with you. You're never alone. The heartbreak in his eyes engraved itself on my heart, and I knew then I could never want anyone else. I planned to gather the photos of Julian's affair into one file on the computer, yet when I opened WhatsApp I discovered Julian's account was still logged in. It was a profile picture I had never seen. My hand shook as I opened the app. There were hardly any contacts. One was Vera, one was a kindergarten parents group. A few subscription accounts, nothing more. I tapped Vera's chat window. The wallpaper showed a 1-year-old grinning straight at the camera. I stared at their conversation for the longest time, tears splashing the screen. Then I opened Vera's Instagram. The pinned photos were of a blissful family of 3. The first, Julian gazed lazily at the lens while Vera held their months-old baby, lips pressed tight, timid. The second, Julian cradled their 1-year-old, bewildered, while Vera stood beside him, smiling gently. The third, Julian and Vera flanked a toddling 2-year-old, holding her tiny hands. The fourth, the child lay giggling across Julian's shoulder, Vera quiet at his side, tenderness in her eyes impossible to hide. The fourth, the fifth, the house felt hollow, the rooms dark. My vision blurred, my breath came in gasps, a cramp seized my belly and sweat drenched me. The phone rang, I steadied my breathing and answered. Julian's gentle voice came through. I'll be back tomorrow. Is the baby behaving? I opened my mouth, but words stuck, my clothes were soaked. It hurts. Julian. Panicked clatters and the screech of a chair followed. Avery, what's wrong? I'm coming. Wait for me. Dimly I heard him order someone nearby, book the earliest flight, call Vance to check on Avery, dial 911, hurry. Consciousness slipped, I soothed our child with every ounce of will until warmth gushed from me and I began to sob. I lost everything. Everything ached. When I woke, Julian's haggard face filled my view. He shot up the moment my eyes opened. Avery, you're finally awake. Bloodshot eyes, Ellis, usually so immaculate, his shirt rumpled, suddenly aged years. I turned away, unwilling to see the pain in his gaze. He brushed my cheek, wiped my tears, struggled to speak. Avery, we'll have another baby, we're still young. I bit my lip until I broke, wailing, Julian, why? Emotion tore through me, tears burst like a dam. I beat his chest, sobbing, why did you lie to me? He froze, shock, heartache, guilt, regret, panic all swirling in his eyes. He stammered, Avery, you know? Looking at the woman he loved most, Julian felt a fist crush his heart, despair threatened to swallow him whole. He dropped to his knees, utterly humbled. Avery, I was wrong, so stupidly wrong. Gulping air, fury flooding me, I shouted, you hid this 4 years. If I hadn't found out, how many more? 5? 10? Forever? Kneeling on cold tile, fists clenched, nails carving his palms, he wept messily. I'm sorry, Avery, it was an accident. On a business trip I drank, mistook her for you, then. He buried his head and sobbed. I made her take the pill the next morning. I never thought she'd still get pregnant. I love you, you can hit me, curse me, just don't leave. I closed my eyes, exhausted. I don't want explanations. We're divorcing. When he tried to speak again, I rolled away. Go. I'm tired. He stayed in the ward, but my thoughts drifted far. Truthfully, the signs were always there. I just loved and trusted Julian too much to see. Promises made in youth, it turns out, can be broken. During my hospital stay Julian came daily. When I ignored him he simply talked, to himself, about childhood, about before. I clamped my hands over my ears, refusing memories, yet Julian stirred them again and again. I snatched a pillow and hurled it, screaming, Julian, this was our second child, leave me be. Stunned by the blow, or by my words, he stared, lips trembling, voice lost. When Julian's startup first gained traction, I conceived. We were ecstatic, our love made flesh. Julian gritted his teeth and spent his first earnings on a tiny, worn house. We wept in each other's arms. It was our first real home. Julian caressed my belly, love spilling from his eyes. Mom and Dad will shower you with love, and Dad will work harder than ever to care for you both. The old complex had thin walls, outside noise leaked in, yet at that moment home felt tangible, but joy was short-lived. A partner defected to a rival, Julian scurried day and night chasing investors. Inexperienced and unknown, he met door after slammed door. He hid the pressure from me, but I saw everything. I begged connections and was rebuffed everywhere. Finally my college senior arranged a dinner so Julian and I could lobby backers. No pedigree, Julian was bullied into drinking himself sick. Then they turned on me, laughing, faces folding into meat, the room spinning. Hey, Dylan, knock one back and we'll fund Riley right now. Barely conscious, Julian still gripped my hand. Pale, I touched my still flat belly. His eyes were bloodshot. Forget their money, Avery. We're leaving. His grip hurt, I could hardly breathe. Almost pleading, he said, Avery, let's go home. I looked, those red eyes had stayed dry while they treated him like a dog, yet now brimmed with tears. He had no pride left. He spun on them. My wife is pregnant, no drink. You begged for weeks, who else will help? Their words were vile, but true. Another week and Julian's dream would collapse. I knew how much this meant. I clenched my teeth. I'll drink. Babies can come again, but this chance will never return. I raised a glass, toasted them, and emptied it. The liquor seared my throat. Julian clutched me and cried without shame. I'm sorry, Avery. I'm so sorry. I reached up and touched his hair, then forced the words out. It's okay, Julian. The baby didn't make it, the alcohol was too strong and he was too little, and in the end he slipped away from us. Julian carried guilt over it for years, and after the company steadied and went public and his status soared, he put 20% of the shares in my name. He trampled everyone who had once looked down on him, and we kept climbing higher and higher. Later my health faltered, I couldn't stay pregnant, and after all that struggle the child still left me. Julian refused to speak of it. The memory was a scar we shared, and now that I'd ripped it open without warning he lost his composure. He didn't even know how to begin, he just stared at me in stunned silence. I wiped my tears. Let's let each other go. We're both exhausted. He said nothing, the sorrow in his eyes as thick and unmoving as fog. That fight, like all the others, ended in stale bitterness. I checked out of the hospital, but Julian still wouldn't agree to a divorce. He didn't go to Vera either, he simply hovered around me. Then Joy showed up alone. I was the one who opened the door. The little girl wore a beautiful princess dress, her hair combed into perfect plaits, a tiny teddy bear backpack strapped to her shoulders. Her features were Julian's, especially when she smiled, as though someone had carved them from the same block. Seeing me, she asked very politely, "Hi, ma'am. I'm here to see my daddy." Her smile was sweet, you could tell she'd been raised in the cradle of love. I thought, if my baby had lived, this is exactly how she would look, cute, confident, unafraid. The sight of me startled her. "Ma'am, why are you crying?" I almost shut the door, then decided a lost child would be worse trouble. I dried my cheeks. "Come in and wait for him." Emery perched quietly on the sofa, curious about the house but never touching anything. "Alex, 2 glasses of water." Alex studied the sudden visitor, the living miniature of Julian, and glanced at me, biting back questions about the miscarriage that had flattened me overnight. Julian rushed home, breathless, and shoved the door wide. I looked away, my face blank. Joy dashed to him, arms around his thighs. "Daddy." Julian's body locked, he couldn't speak. She kept gazing up, calling, "Daddy, Daddy." Finally I broke the hush. "Take her home." I was too calm, Julian stared as if trying to crack me open. I turned and walked back to my room. Julian tried to see me several times after that, I sent him away each time. I stayed inside so long Alex feared I'd rot, and when I noticed the new white threads in the housekeeper's hair I agreed to a short walk. I drifted around the neighborhood and stepped into a coffee shop, and found Vera. She was dressed as immaculately as ever, time had only added polish. She smiled brightly. "Dylan, what a coincidence." I swept my eyes over her, she lived on the opposite side of town, the run-in was staged and sloppy. I lifted my lids in a curt nod and started to leave. She called after me in a rush, I pivoted, impatient. She tucked her hair back, flashing a pale wrist and the icy jade bracelet I'd once spotted in Julian's pocket. I'd thought it was a surprise for me and waited like a fool. Later he gave me a ruby necklace from an auction and I forgot the bracelet. I touched the necklace still circling my throat and felt the sick punch of irony. I knew why she'd come, she wouldn't confess the affair, just wanted to jab the wound. I leveled my voice. "Something on your mind?" She widened her eyes in a perfect act. "You and Riley are still so sweet. He dotes on you like a little girl." I laughed, brittle. I'd just buried my child, my skin sallow, my blood depleted, and she chose to gouge the ache. I stepped forward and slapped her. "Our marriage is none of your business." She clutched her cheek, stunned, then lifted her chin, tears trembling, picture-perfect pity bait. "I don't know what I said to offend you, Dylan." I slapped her again. "Then think harder." "Useless." Vera began to sob, soft hiccups, then suddenly whispered toward my shoulder, "Riley." I crossed my arms and stared down at her. Julian stood behind me, face storm dark, brows locked, fury sparking in his eyes. Before she could play victim, he took my hand with aching tenderness. "Did you hurt yourself?" Vera froze, eyes blood red. He shot her a warning glare, scooped me into his arms, and said, "Let's go home." Far down the block I glanced back, she stood lost, gaze unfocused, then I looked away. He set me on the sofa, wrapped a blanket around me, fetched water. I sipped, then spoke. "Julian, we're not getting divorced." He seized my shoulders, incredulous. "Really, Avery?" I traced the face I knew by heart and nodded. "Really." Joy's visit had been Vera's idea, I'd known from the start, so I paid to leak the story of Vera's affair. Overnight the internet drowned her in insults, and Julian's company shares wobbled. I scrolled the comments idly while Julian dashed home. He said nothing, he understood everything. He studied me for a long beat, then sighed. Avery, as long as it calms you, do whatever you need. My face stayed flat. I want the house back. Without hesitation he answered, done. It was community property, I could have sued, but he surrendered. You had to admire his endurance. He acted as though none of it had happened, still speaking gently, still bringing my favorite red velvet cake and peonies. Yet we both knew the ground had shifted, even if we left the cracks unspoken. The next time I saw Vera was in the hospital. I'd burned with fever all night and was on N4. Vera and her daughter occupied the next room. She flinched when she saw me. I couldn't read the swirl behind her eyes, rage, grief, resentment, none of it concerned me. Before I was discharged she stepped into my room. Avery, let's talk. Only the two of us, white walls closing in. Hatred flickered across her face. You knew all along Joy's call was my doing, didn't you? I dipped my chin. So what? A child misdialing is believable, but the logs were right there, Vera must have seen them. Her perfectly timed murmur had been meant for me. Maybe the day I first confronted her she'd sensed it and used the child to tether Julian. Vera was never as innocent as she looked. She laughed, a cracked sound. Do you know how I envy you? Julian's eyes never leave you. Even though I look like you, to him I'm just a little sister, no desire, nothing. So at that gala, when I saw him blind drunk, I knew my chance had come. With a face too similar to mine and a few calculated invitations, Vera became me in his fogged mind, and the two of them crossed the final line. When I found out I was carrying his baby, you can't imagine how happy I was. Julian asked her to terminate the pregnancy. She agreed to his face, then quit her job and secretly carried the child to term. The next time Julian saw her, the baby was almost due. He was nearly unhinged, eyes bloodshot, waiting for the delivery. At first Julian rejected both the child and Vera, but after spending time together he slowly accepted the situation. Vera broke down, sobbing out her grievances against me. I thought a baby would make him stay, but the moment you cried you tore apart everything I'd spent years building. My tears wouldn't stop, my heart hurt so much I couldn't breathe. If Vera had never existed, maybe Julian and I would have lived happily ever after. Or maybe not. Julian mishandled everything. He was the prime culprit. He let the disaster ferment, exhaustively hiding it, playing me for a fool for 5 years. I looked at the woman in front of me with a trace of pity and sorrow. She couldn't see the pain Julian had dealt her. Instead she hated me, equally pitiable. I said quietly, which of us is better off now? Vera stared at me for a long time, then finally turned and walked away. In the end Vera couldn't bear the online backlash and moved out of the neighborhood with her child. Julian wanted to speak to me but swallowed his words. I pretended not to notice. We still lived under the same roof, yet we slept in separate rooms and exchanged only a handful of sentences. Later, Julian would sit alone by the window drinking, bottles and cans scattered across the floor, cigarette butts and ashes everywhere, the reek of alcohol and smoke thick in the air. His noise kept me awake. I slipped on a jacket and stepped out, finding only a lonely silhouette. I walked over and nudged him with my foot. You're keeping me up. Julian lifted his head, his eyes were shot with crimson, haggard beyond his 30 years. He tilted the bottle back for another gulp, muttering as if to himself, maybe this is my punishment. I ignored him, but he pulled me down as though desperate for someone to listen. Avery, I'm sorry. I don't know how we ended up like this. I promised you lifelong happiness when we were kids, and I ruined you. I didn't know what fit he was having. I watched coldly, unmoved. He kept talking whether I answered or not. I've sent Vera and the child abroad. I plan to cut contact and make a fresh start with you. At that his voice grew frantic. But I never thought the plane would crash. Vera and the child were on that flight. I froze, staring at Julian in disbelief, searching his face for any hint of a lie. There was none. I hated Vera, but I hated Julian more, so I decided to stay married to him for life, just to spite her, to keep her a mistress in the shadows forever, her child branded illegitimate. Yet I never wished Vera dead. Julian clawed at his hair, collapsing under the weight of guilt. Those who betray love deserve this. That promise I made to you came true. I knew exactly which words he meant. That I would be the one he loved most, and if he ever wronged me, he'd spend the rest of his life alone. Karma turns full circle. I felt no pity for Julian or Vera, only for that sweet little girl. Julian and I separated. After months of letting himself go, he began showing up every day. If I refused to open the door, he'd stand outside. Whether I saw him or not, he appeared on time. One day Alex took leave and went home. I went downstairs to take out the trash, and Julian cornered me. I looked at him calmly, utterly detached, his eyes reddened. Avery, I'd rather you scream at me, hate me, than face this silence. It terrifies me. I turned and walked away without a glance. If he were truly afraid, how could he have borne to watch me suffer, to deceive me for so long? When Alex returned, she resumed looking after me. One evening a downpour began while Julian sat in his car. The street flooded. For the first time Alex spoke up for him. Avery, won't you really let him inside? I stood by the window, rain blurring the glass until I couldn't see into the car. I drew the curtain and said quietly, he'll leave soon. I saw the hesitation on Alex's face and gave a small, freeing smile. Alex, he and I can't go back. All I want now is to love myself. These past years I've wandered the length of my country, seeing boundless grasslands, the surging yellow river, ranges of layered peaks. I've watched winter in Norway, when the fishing port lies under snow and rows of painted houses glitter through the night like scattered stars. I've traveled alone to Finland to chase the aurora, that dazzling ribbon across the sky, a feast for any traveler's eyes. So I was surprised when, while in the UK, Julian called. His voice was as warm and gentle as ever. Avery, can you come see me? I gazed at the crowds flowing past my window and said nothing. After a long silence he pleaded, I have terminal lung cancer, not long to live. I need to see you. After everything, I figured it was time to end the entanglement. I booked the first flight, went straight to the hospital from the airport. I had imagined our reunion 100 times, thought I would be free of anger and we might smile at one another. I had not imagined Julian reduced to skin and bones, breathing his last in a hospital bed. He tried to take my hand but lacked the strength. I didn't move. He gave a bitter smile. You still can't forgive me. I've seen enough, thought enough. I won't torture myself anymore. I haven't forgiven him, but I no longer hate him so fiercely. Calmly I asked, since when? He dropped his gaze, docile as a child. 2 years. Years of cigarettes and alcohol had caught up with him. Silence filled the room. Finally he spoke. Avery, when I die, I want my ashes with yours. I raised an eyebrow in a broad, wicked grin. In your dreams. I'm scattering you to the sharks. Julian laughed, and for a moment I saw the bright boy he used to be. A faint flush colored his gaunt face, lending him life. Avery, you still hold your grudges, love and hate with the same edge. He sighed. Let the sharks have me, then, whatever makes you happy. I'd always hated how easily he humored me, hated that he could still love me while cheating. He asked for Old Port candied haw skewers. I didn't refuse his first plea. I bought them and returned to find snow drifting thick outside, and I lifted my eyes to his ward. Julian died half an hour after I left. The doctor said he felt no pain, that he had managed to smile and told the nurse, today I'm happy. I stared at his motionless form and tears slid down. How had we come to this? Julian left everything to me. I used the money to scatter his ashes across every reach of the sea. Sunlight flashed on the water, blinding me. The wind lifted my hair and I breathed in deeply. Julian and I spent a lifetime tangled in love and loathing, and now it ends, abrupt and bare. From here on there is only me, and all I can do is love myself. Thank you for listening. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? If you liked the video, please like and share with friends. We look forward to your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. See you next time.